This is a Salvia Divinorum 10x extract, trip report by Salvia Firstry, posted to rawid.org on September 8, 2007. I was sitting in the living room with a small glass pipe in my hand. A friend had given me a handful of fortified leaves that had been soaked in a 10 times concentrated salvia extract. The friend said the leaves would give about 4 good hits. I decided that I would take 2 hits first, then let my wife decide if she wanted to try the remaining 2. I wanted to be the one to describe what it felt like so that she could decide for herself. The pipe was empty, so I packed a small amount of the leaf into the bowl. I took the first hit, inhaled slowly, and held the smoke in my lungs for a moment. Nothing noticeable happened. I exhaled and opened my eyes. The room looked the same. The couch was the same. The light from the lamp was the same. I thought perhaps I had not taken enough, or perhaps my body needed a little more time. I reached for another pinch of the leaf, placed it in the pipe, and this time I remembered a tip that I had heard from other users: torch the leaf well before inhaling. I held a lighter under the bowl, let the flame lick the leaf, and then inhaled a deep, steady breath. I felt the smoke fill my chest, and as I exhaled, I sensed a shift. It started as a faint pressure behind my eyes, like a low hum that was just under the surface of my thoughts. Then, almost as if a large invisible hand had pushed a button, a loud rushing sound filled the room. It was not a sound that came from any speaker. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I could hear a whoosh, a pulse, a wave that seemed to push the air itself. In that instant I realized that the drug works in levels for me. The first whoosh lifted me a little, the second whoosh lifted me higher, and the third whoosh would bring me back down. Each whoosh felt like a rapid change in the density of the air around me. My body suddenly felt heavy and light at the same time. I could not sit up any longer. I fell back against the couch, my limbs relaxing as if a strong anesthetic had been poured into my veins. I could not feel any pain, any ache, any tension. I was in a state where my muscles were almost detached from my mind. I tried to speak to my wife to tell her what was happening. My voice came out as if I were standing in a large hall, with a great echo and reverb. It sounded distant and loud at the same time. I shouted, "Oh!" The first thing it does is make the room start moving, and indeed the room seemed to move. The smoke in the air had not yet cleared. The light from the lamp seemed to shift in hue, turning a deeper amber, and the shadows on the walls stretched and twisted. It was as if the walls themselves were being pulled apart by invisible hands. The shadows and the smoke cut the walls into thin slices, and those slices began to float toward me. I saw the world broken into countless pieces, each one a fragment of reality, each one moving slowly, each one glinting like a tiny mirror. One of those fragments drifted directly in front of my face. It seemed to be offering itself to me. At that moment, a voice entered my mind. It was not a spoken voice, but a pure feeling, a psychic communication that bypassed my ears and went straight to my sense of understanding. The feeling was strong, powerful, and it was not my own thought. It told me that this fragment was my piece of the world, that I should take it, that it represented the true nature of existence on this earth. I was shocked. I could not believe that a plant could convey such a message. I felt a surge of disbelief and excitement. I shouted, "Really?" in my head, trying to ask the presence for confirmation. The presence seemed impatient. It demanded that I put my arms into a C shape, as if forming a cup. I lifted my arms, bending my elbows, and tried to shape them as instructed. The presence had an attitude that felt like a teacher who was annoyed that I had not understood something obvious. It seemed to smirk and say, "Do you not see? Grab this piece of earth and come with me. You are a silly human consciousness, but you will never know everything." I responded in my mind, "I can handle any trickery. I am here for the truth. Who are you and what can you show me?" Even as I tried to sound confident, a part of me was trembling. I was scared, though I did not want to admit it. I felt a cold sweat forming at the back of my neck, a sense that something huge was happening inside my head. I wrapped my arms around the floating fragment as if it were a small, glowing stone. I was still seated on the couch, but the sensation was as if I were standing on a platform that was moving upward. The first attempt to grasp the fragment did not work. It slipped away like a fish. I tried again, and on the second attempt the fragment seemed to dissolve into me. I felt my consciousness melt into something larger. The next whoosh hit me. I was no longer in the living room. I was in a place that felt like a spirit world, a space where all the souls that have ever lived gathered around the planet. I could see each soul holding a piece of the world, each piece unique, each piece being injected into living creatures to fulfill some purpose. I looked at the planet from a distance. It was a warm ball of potential, a sphere of liquid energy. It was not completely bright. It had gray and polluted patches, like oil spilled on water. Yet it was not black. There was still hope, a sense that the planet could heal. I felt as if I were lying on my back, my limbs spread out, but my soul's limbs were also extended, reaching into the liquid sphere. I could see the planet rotating slowly, and I imagined myself paddling with my arms and legs, trying to spin it in the right direction. Around me, other souls were also paddling, each in a different direction, each trying to move the planet according to their own understanding. It seemed chaotic, as if everyone was pulling the planet in opposite ways, threatening to throw it out of alignment. In that moment, I thought that everyone should try Salvia, that it would open their eyes to the same truth I was seeing. I felt a surge of pride, as if I had reached a higher level of consciousness. The feeling of pride turned into a strange sense of sinfulness. It felt like I was breaking a taboo, like eating chocolate when I was supposed to be on a diet, or drinking from a fountain of youth that was meant to be hidden. I imagined myself jumping off the planet, soaring into space, looking back at the Earth as it became a small blue marble. I felt fire on my back, a thrill that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was still on the couch, but the couch seemed far away, as if I were looking at it from a great distance. My wife was still there, watching me, her eyes wide. I could see my own face in the reflection of the window. My face looked strange, almost evil, as if a mask had been placed over me. I said to her, "It is great, take yours, take your piece, take it." My tone was the same as the tone my friends had used when they tried to convince me to try marijuana in my teenage years, a mix of encouragement and warning. I wanted her to see what I was seeing, to join me in the flight around the galaxy. I imagined us together, flying in the Earth's orbit, time stretching out, days becoming minutes, minutes becoming seconds. Even though my wife was right there, a solid anchor in the room, Salvia made me feel that time did not exist. She took her hits. I watched her as she inhaled, as the smoke curled around her nose, as she exhaled, and the same whoosh seemed to pull her toward her own piece of the planet. My own effects were beginning to fade, but I could still hear the voice in my head. It had lost much of its earlier sharpness, becoming softer, more like a friend on the phone who wants to end a conversation. I tried to keep asking questions. What about this? What about that? The voice answered, but the answers were faint, as if the speaker was moving farther away. I realized that I was talking to myself, that the voice was my own mind trying to make sense of the experience. Time seemed to stop. The room shrank around me, the walls coming in close, the air thickening. I felt claustrophobic, as if the space I was in could collapse at any moment. I looked at my wife. She was frozen, her body still, her eyes glazed. I tried to ask her a question, but she did not respond. I realized that she was also under the influence, that her mind was in the same place as mine, but perhaps a little further along the trip. I felt a panic rise inside me, a fear that I might be alone in this strange space. I tried to calm myself. I reminded myself that the drug was the cause of this feeling, that I had taken the first hit, she had taken the second. I imagined millions of people throughout history who had used Salvia, sitting on an infinite couch that stretched left and right beyond any horizon. I saw them as silhouettes, each one inhaling, each one traveling through their own version of this space. This image helped me let go of the fear that my wife was not real, that she was just a construct of my imagination. I rejected that thought, calling it a coming down hallucination, a side effect of the drug wearing off. After a few minutes, my wife began to move her arms in strange angles, not the same angles I had used. She seemed to be finding her own way back to the room. I tried to stand, but my legs felt heavy, as if they were made of lead. I knew the trip was ending, that I would not be sucked into another piece of the planet. Yet I was still uncertain about how long the after effects would last, whether another wave would return. The feeling of uncertainty lingered, but after a short while my head cleared. My thoughts became sharper, the room returned to its normal lighting, the couch was once again a piece of furniture, not a distant platform. When my wife returned to normal, she looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and relief. I realized that I had probably interfered with her experience by trying to talk to her while I was still disoriented. I had been scared, but the fear only became real at the end, when I thought about returning to ordinary life after having been outside of it. The salvia seemed to whisper to me that I could return, that the questions I had asked about reality were part of the process. It told me that I was creating my wife, and she was creating me, that we were separate entities but we existed as one. When my mind ran out of ideas, she would think of something else. Reality would not cease to exist because we were both there. I felt that if she had not been there, smoking the same plant, I could have been completely lost. The words I spoke out loud to rationalize my re-entry into this world made little sense.